Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. Today, I have with me Quazi Johir. He is a dynamic entrepreneur, coach, and thought leader specializing in the transformative power of identity shifting. As the founder and CEO of a thriving coaching business, Quazi has dedicated his career to helping individuals unlock their highest potential by reconnecting with their authentic selves. With a unique blend of ancient wisdom and modern practices, he empowers his people to manifest their deepest desires in areas like wealth, entrepreneurship, and personal fulfillment. He has inspired thousands worldwide as his groundbreaking approach integrates science, spirituality, and personal growth, making complex ideas simple and actionable for anyone from teenagers to seasoned entrepreneurs. Welcome to the show, Quasi.
So is that the intro that you just read that I put in when I was, wow, ChatGPT does a great job.
Yeah. I edited a little bit, but yes, ChatGPT is
I was like, I
amazing.
don't know what to write about myself because I don't write bios about myself. So I'm like, okay, ChatGPT, what would you say? Like, could you write a short bio for Quasi? Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
this
I
works.
do that too. I'm like, what would somebody say about me? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty awesome.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, but I know a little bit more about you. So I wanted to start by, you know, this show, you probably listened to the trailer, I think, when I asked you to be on it. And it's about intuition. From a young age, it seems like you had a intuitive knowing or something happened that you went off the beaten path or the path that had been beaten for you. And I wondered if you could start by, sharing that story with our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. So my spiritual journey started really when I was, like, I would say seriously when I was in 2017. I was around 20, but prior to that, I was always interested in personal development, but I never got into spirituality per se and the more esoteric metaphysical stuff. So it always started with just becoming better myself. And, when I was around 12, I had my first or my second big move from Africa. I was living in Africa at the time. My parents worked for the United Nations. I lived in Ivory Coast, French speaking, amazing, beautiful beaches. Moved from there to London, United Kingdom, and that was like a very formative age because you're turning 13, and I'm about to go into later middle school. And as soon as I move and I go to school, I notice how different I am to everyone else because I moved to West London and it was a public school. I was very, very different from everyone else. I spoke differently, I wasn't accustomed to the lingo. And so naturally, I was an outcast. And so I got bullied a lot and I was left for myself. And that was the very first time in my life I experienced that because up until the age of 12 or even like 11, I lived in Bangladesh. And I was kind of like I was the king of Bangladesh. Like in my school, I was the cool kid. My parents worked for the UN, and like, it was all great. Like, and I was just born and raised there, so culture was very, very different. But then it was a very much of a shock to me when I was no longer when I was dethroned. Right, I was like, "What is this? I'm not used to this." And so growing up in that environment, feeling so isolated, ostracized, and lonely, uh, I just kind of kept to myself, and I wondered like, why? Why don't people like me? What's wrong with me? Like, what can I do? How can I change to be likable so I can get validation from others? And so then I started to uh, speak differently. I started to try and take on the accent because I had this weird, like, American, Bangladeshi, African accent going on. I still have a weird accent still today, but now I've just decided to own it. But I would practice in front of the mirror. But then my very first into personal development came when I was just deeply, deeply angry at others for bullying me, and it would get very, very abusive, and kids just kids. Uh, but I started to think, okay, well, if I don't know, I got exposed to some material about uh, going to the gym, weightlifting, and getting in shape because I was a scrawny kid, and I was like, wow, if I get buff, no one's gonna mess with me. And so I got like dumbbells at home and then I would just do bicep curls. And then eventually, when I turned like 14, 15, I begged my parents to get me a gym membership. And I started religiously going to the gym. And when I went to the gym and worked on my body and I started to get better and better and fitter, I saw this transformation happening, and I was like, wow, okay, well, I'm getting in really good shape. And I started to feel like a different person in the
Mhm.
process. And I noticed that my identity was shifting. I no longer viewed myself the same way. Like every single cell in my body was transforming. But with that, my confidence level too. And so at the time, I had crooked teeth, and, people would call me buck teeth Quasi. And so that would hurt a lot. I was like, oh, if I had better teeth, then the girls I had a crush on would like me back. And the
Yeah.
guys who I wanted to get respect from would all of a sudden respect me. And then I wouldn't be this outcast. I would just be one of the popular kids and be accepted. And so I also begged my parents to get me braces. And my mom, she felt really bad for me. And she was like, yeah, I'm ready to pay whatever is needed to get you braces. We weren't like super wealthy at the time. We were well off, but like not wealthy. But she was like, I'm willing to pay whatever is needed. But it turns out, the NHS, because they inspected my teeth and they were like, your teeth are so bad, this is actually a health hazard. Yeah, this is like toxic for you. And
Okay.
so they were like, okay, we'll give it to you for free. And so I got braces, and every single night, or like just every day, I would imagine, after getting my braces taken off, I would have these perfectly big straight teeth, and then I would just be this confident person, and everyone would like me. And I just subconsciously pictured that. And then finally the day came when my braces got taken off, and just like that, I like literally that day, I felt this shift within me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a different person. And then I started to walk with a strut, my chest up, and I had all these, like, this big difference in mannerisms within me. And so that was my accidental into bettering myself. And it wasn't until later when I read this book by Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics, that I learned the importance of self-image. Maxwell Maltz is the plastic surgeon who noticed whenever he gave someone a new face, they started to get happier, wealthier, more successful. But then some never did. And so he
Hmm.
wondered why. And it was because their self-image changed as a result. And I believe that's what happened to me. But then finally, at the age of like 18 to 20, um, I found this book on like, I was very much into the dating space because I'm trying to catch up. All the time I got bullied, and like the attention lack of attention from women. So I wanted to find a partner and just date around, but I just couldn't put myself out there. And so I was watching this guru's video, and then he recommended this book called The Power of Now, and the
Yeah.
importance of the present moment. And so when I started to read that, I learned about panic attacks, like the pain body attack. And I also learned about the importance of being in the now. And so I noticed that when I would have these pain body attacks, um, I would just get so deeply, pulled into them. I just couldn't think about anything else. I was no longer like, it wasn't me. I lost myself in it. And so as soon as I started to notice that there is an observer, there is a witness, that's when the separation happened between me and this personhood and this
Yeah.
character and the thoughts that this character had. And that time was like sophomore to junior year of college. I had gone through a really big breakup with this girl I was seeing in college, and it wasn't like a breakup. It was like we were having a fling, but I had a thing for her, and like she didn't reciprocate, and that was like the biggest heartbreak of my life as a kid. But also, I was supposed to go into a 9 to 5. So I was doing this college internship, and I felt really, really lost with my life. And I was like, what do I want? I'm doing this engineering degree, and I only picked it because I was good at math and physics. And I actually wanted to do astrophysics because that seemed cool, but it would never pay. So what's economical that would get me a job? And so my parents wouldn't feel regretful for paying like 250,000 to send me to college. And so, uh, I did a summer internship at a corrugated box manufacturing plant, a very big, like Inc. 500 company. Um, and it was great. Like, but the offer and everything that they gave me was great. But then when I would show up to work, I would just notice every single person was so depressed. They were trying to stick their arms in the machines to get workers' comp and just get out of there because you're in a factory, no
Ugh.
daylight, nothing. You're working a 7 to 8 hour shift, and the hours for me were 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I would have to wake up at 5. It'd take me 40 minutes to get there. wake up at 5, do all my stuff, my morning routines, and then make lunch, and then pack it, and then go out to work. And then through that experience, I learned, like, it was just every single day was deeply, deeply frustrating. I was like, is this really what I want to do for the next 40 years of my life?
Yeah.
This can't be it. Like, I can't just begin to live my life at 60 or 65 when my bones are all achy and the life energy was just sapped from me because I just spent 40 years in prison. Uh, and then I get to live my life with what? Like, why would I even care about retirement money? No, I want to do it now. And so I remember I wrote down on my journal one day, like by January 1st, 2000, 2000, sorry, by this was by July 1st, 2019, I wanted to make my first $20,000 month with my own coaching business. And back then, I just started a YouTube channel. I had no idea what a coaching business was. I had no idea how I would monetize it. I just made the intention and I put it out there, and I just focused on making YouTube videos. And literally one thing led to another. I know this story is getting really, really long. So,
That's okay.
it's extremely long, this story, but to keep it short, everything sort of aligned with everything, that you've seen in the program, and um, that I share about my story. And people started to reach out to me for coaching, and I was like, oh, okay, this is actually viable. And so I doubled down on it. And then August of 2019 was my first $20,000 month. I was only 1 month late from my goal that I'd set. And I was just like, when I realized that's what happened, I was just completely blown away at how the world just took care of me when I trusted it.
Yeah, and you have a huge YouTube channel um, that has so much amazing content in it. And I guess, one of the things that you're really able to do in that is I know that wasn't what your parents wanted. That
No,
wasn't
definitely not.
that and there was something that intuitively you just knew that you had to make that decision to which is really hard to do when you're that age
Yeah.
and your parents have just put you through college and all of this stuff
Yep.
to be able to say, "Hey, love you guys, but I just can't
Yeah.
do this."
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, at that time, I don't even know if I would call it intuition. It was just like, I have no choice.
Mhm.
There's just no choice. Like, I
Yeah.
have to make this work, because if I don't, I will forever regret not trying, not giving
Yeah.
it my all. I will
Yeah.
always work a job wondering, what if I made this work? What if I made that work? You know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and when you were talking about all these things that you did, you lifted weights, you did all these things to your physical appearance, which I think is typically how we try and reach to feel better or feel differently about ourselves. If I leave this marriage, if I get this job, if I should make this change and all
if
this kind of
if
things. But what's really, I think the crux of the issue that you are talking about is something very significant happened for you when you did that. You didn't just go get braces or go lift weights and get a different body. You identity shifted. You shifted your identity. And so I would imagine, that's the difference between when you do that and something works and you do that and it doesn't work. And I love that you call it identity shifting. Um I'd love for you to explain a little bit more for our listeners, like, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So identity shifting is just, as the words kind of portray it to be, it's to shift your identity. But for a really long time, I thought my misconception, and this was even during my coaching years, that I made this big error, even in coaching clients. Uh, I thought it meant being someone else because I am damaged. I'm damaged, therefore I must become someone else. And it could not be further from the truth, because the truth is, I'm not damaged. It is just that there are misconceptions about who I was meant to be. So the way I, teach our clients about identity shifting is, it's a process of homecoming. It's about being who you were meant to be. When you allow yourself to be who you're meant to be, and have what you want, the things that will happen in your life go beyond your wildest dreams that you ever could have imagined. So there is this things, these goals. We have two different types of goals: our heart's true goals and foreign goals. These foreign goals are kind of conditioned uh, within us by society. It tells you you must go to college and want to get a job and want to make this kind of money and have this kind of car and have this kind of house and have this kind of relationship, kids, etc. And especially, I don't know why this is coming to me right now intuitively, but if you let's say you're gay and you're growing up in a Christian household, uh, like you're supposed to be straight and you're supposed to go to church and God hates the gays and God, there's this. Like they teach you all this shit, right? And then what it does is this wasn't who you were meant to be. So it stuffs your heart into a box, and every single day you feel like you're in prison. You feel like you are in a prison called society. And
Mm.
so you can't truly be who you're meant to be. And so when that happens, we feel miserable, we feel stuck, we feel constrained, we feel like we're not living to our fullest, we don't feel free. Um, so identity shifting is about removing those false layers of conditioning that we hold on to, because there's subtle ways, like even if we talk about career or business, right? Like, oh, but I'm supposed to do this, right? But I was taught I was supposed to do that. Beliefs are important because they help us function within society and simplify things. But fundamentally, a belief is an assumption that we make to make life easy for us, right? But not all assumptions are true, and they're not true at all times. Some belief, every single belief will eventually become a limiting belief. And so when you discard an old belief, you're able to step into a new paradigm, into the next version of yourself. But it's just knowing how long a belief will serve you until it no longer does. So that's really what identity shifting is. It's a dynamic process of you becoming more and more of your highest self and who you are meant to be. And so it's giving yourself permission to discard certain things that you identified with as Abby 1.0 or like Abby in the past. Just because you were this way doesn't mean you're the same way today. Just because I made one decision yesterday and I made a video about one topic doesn't mean I'm going to make the video about the same topic again. So there's this thing in human psychology called the consistency bias. We fight like hell to appear consistent because otherwise we will be rejected from society and we will be outcast and left to survive outside the tribe, which would significantly increase the likelihood of death. So evolutionarily, that's how we just evolved. But you know, if we go back to the concept of identity shifting in this modern day and age, if we want to become who we're meant to be, life can't be so black or white. It has to be an in the moment intuitive thing of, hey, this felt right yesterday, but it's not feeling fully aligned now.
Yeah.
This isn't the right thing to do now. You know?
Yeah, yes, and I love everything you're saying because it has so much to do with, what I understand as intuition is it's exactly the same thing, right? It's that the the rub is when we are not listening to who we are really meant to be and we keep trying to stuff ourselves into, a round peg into a square
Yep,
um
exactly.
hole. And the freedom like you're talking about. What you also really touched on there is, well, a couple of things I want to come back to, but but one, has to do with these thoughts, right? And the way that the mind works and the way that the mind divides things in its very I was just got off a podcast where I was explaining how, the very complex filing system of the mind, good or bad, right or wrong, and how that really we begin to judge all of these thoughts that we have. And if I do this, it's right. If I do this, it's wrong. And how that can really get in the way of what you're talking about finding who who more of you really looks like, as opposed to from an I call it like from an inside out perspective instead of an outside in.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Um, I wonder what your thoughts are about these beliefs, that you're talking about and what you find with your students, the beliefs that get in the way the most and are the hardest to how you help people get out of them, because I know for me, for myself, for so long, and many of the people that I work with, part of the belief problem is you can do this but I can't.
Mm, yes.
Can you speak to that particularly like where it when it relates to like manifesting and becoming,
Yeah.
what you want to become and having the things that you want to have?
Yeah, so there's essentially there's two different types of beliefs that we have and three different levels of it. So if we start with the different types, there is the worldview and the self view. How I view my world and how I view myself in it. And the three different levels of belief are the lowest level is a thought. It appears as a thought. A thought mixed with an emotion for long enough becomes a belief. So, for example, when you recall past memories of thoughts, feelings are a lot stronger because they're bodily. Thoughts are more mind, feelings are bodily. So when we think of a past experience, we actually feel that feeling first because it's a familiar feeling. And every single thought feeling combination that stores a memory or a belief, uh, it can be accessed through that feeling. So sometimes when you're driving through a neighborhood, an old neighborhood, you feel nostalgic, you feel that feeling.
Yeah.
So every feeling thought combination has a unique signature. Every feeling has a unique flavor within our body. Um, so thought evolves to the level of belief with enough emotion. When beliefs become really, really strong, they become convictions. When they become a conviction, we will never question them. There's a great saying, I can't remember by who, but we question all the beliefs except the ones we truly hold dearest. And those we will never think to question, and those will govern our fate. Um, so, the only way that one can begin to dismantle beliefs that don't serve them is to see first of all uh, to actually pursue something outside of your comfort zone. So if you were to pursue something outside of your comfort zone, which is a goal, let's say you're in a job, you want to quit your job and start a business. Well, as soon as you make that intention, you feel all these bodily feelings. The limiting beliefs come up in the form of feelings. Oh, but what if this? What if that? What if it doesn't work? What if I know other people are doing it, but what if I can't do it? What if this doesn't work for me? All of these beliefs come up. Oh, it looks so complex. You're thinking about the end of the marathon when you haven't even taken the first step, and so um, all these beliefs come up. The question is, how do you reprogram that belief? And there's a big methodology to it, which is what we help our clients do in the program through identity shifting. But a simple way you can do that is what is the feeling that's arising when I intend to do this task that's preventing me, that I'm feeling so much resistance to. So for example, a client I was speaking to was very resistant to making YouTube videos. So or content in general. Well, what's the feeling that's coming up? Oh, well, what if my family disapproves of this and I can't be fully vulnerable, right? And so then there is a decision to make there. What is something I'm holding on to? Oh, disapproval from my family. Why? So just asking questions around it to dismantle it, to like confronting that belief or that feeling because it was held so dearly, it had become a conviction. Like
Yeah.
I'm this kind of person, self view, I'm the kind of person who doesn't make content about this because my family would disapprove of me. If my family disapproved of me, then they would view me as this kind of person, which wouldn't be consistent to how I had presented myself.
Yes. Yeah, and it's funny, like, that's literally I've shared this story before. I That's how I moved to Florida. I was in the middle of a meditation, and I was sitting there, and this thought came in from nowhere. What if I let go of my identity? And my next thought was, well, literally, well, I guess I could move to Florida. And I literally walked out of my meditation spot. I said that to my husband, and 3 weeks later, we were on a plane, like, scoping out places, and it was just as you're talking about. It's like, there's possibility where there wasn't before. Before it was like, "No, I guess we just gotta be cold forever, and there's not really where we can go, and you're going around
It's
with
just
your
who I
mom."
am.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
the
just
person that lives in a cold environment and has this.
yeah, and I just don't yeah, I can't do that,
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah. So I love that. One of the things you said, you talked about beliefs we don't question, and I think this is such an important point, and it really is. I think, especially in the society that we're in today, where people are so certain about so many things. Everybody's whatever their side is, they're certain about it, and it's a time where oftentimes people just there's things that they're holding so dear that they don't even realize they're holding dear. It doesn't occur to them that it could be any other way, and how so what you're saying is by asking these questions and just like poking holes in this and sort of shining a light on another possibility this is what can help us get out of this. But we have to have the awareness to be able to say, I'm holding this belief, like this is a belief, right? Like you're in the jar.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
in some way you got to get out of the jar to see that you're in the jar.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's one of the main tools we teach our clients is to learn how to center your attention. And we center our attention by asking three main questions. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? And we do this throughout the day. And I advise clients to do it once an hour. Kind of just tap into this center point because when you wake up in a dream, you become a lucid dreamer. You're able to control the dream and the events that happen in it, and nothing is too serious in the dream. You might be having a nightmare. If you wake up, you're like, oh, just a nightmare. No biggie. Cool. I can just change this dream. What happens when you wake up in reality? Because reality is just a waking dream. What's the reference point of waking up in reality? And that is that source of pure awareness, right? And so when we can look at ourselves and what we're going through in the third person and not take it so personally, like this isn't me, this is simply a character. This is simply a name and a body that was taken, at birth. And this is just an illusion or a film that's unfolding. I
Yeah.
can either be the actor or I can step out and be the witness that's watching the movie happen. And so everything spontaneously happens according to God's will. And so whatever's arising from God's will with intuition, that is being acted on instead of being resisted, right? So one of the main ways in which you can shift those beliefs, obviously first is awareness and watching it, but I think really those will come to the surface when you're on the path. And for a lot of people, the path is different. For Olympians, the path is their sport. Uh, for teachers, the path is what they're teaching. Like if someone is pursuing something and is wanting to reach the highest peak of it. Uh, so for me, like in business was the path for me, like growing the business. Um, I start to notice that the same lessons that I learned in dating, in fitness, and even improving my golf game, or in school and studying, similar principles of life they start to converge with each other from each of these fields. And there's a recurring pattern happening, right? So, but when you step onto the path and you make a commitment to excellency, to reaching the highest, you'll realize that every single path of external achievement eventually becomes a path of self-development. It becomes a path of you maximizing your potential to evolving to highest being. Because we're all infinite beings looking for infinity in the finite. We're looking for a million one, a million two, a million three, but these numbers will keep on going forever. It will never feed that infinite thirst. And so eventually the attention turns from let's grow in this to let's grow in this. Let's see how far we can take this being. And so, in um the works of the ancient yogi, I can't Patanjali, he wrote the founding book for Hatha Yoga. And in that book, he begins with, and now yoga. That's the beginning of the book. And now yoga, because you've tried the alcohol, you tried the drugs, you tried the money, the women, the men, whatever it is, and now yoga,
Mm. Yeah.
the Yoga Sutras. That's what.
So, okay. So you just talked about, and I, I couldn't agree more. And I really feel like for myself, my profession is definite. Like people will ask, well, why are you doing what you're doing? And it's like, because I have to. Like this is my soul, this is how my soul is evolving. This is the next thing I have to do. I don't know where it's going or what it's happening, but I just know that this is the avenue. But what can happen, I think, for people, myself included, when we're going after a goal, like you're talking about the next, right? That can also become this unconscious program of I've got to do this because I'm not worthy if I don't. I've got
Hmm.
to make X amount of money because it's a worthiness program. So
Yes.
how do you know when that's what's happening versus this is my soul evolving?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something I struggled with a lot because initially my drive was I must prove my parents wrong,
Right.
right? I
Yeah.
have to prove them wrong that I can do it.
Yep.
Survival, getting away from. But what causes movement? because if you get away from something, you can go in all different directions, right? You're just getting away from it. As long as you're not there, you're good. But what causes movement and definite progress is moving towards something. So we have two different kinds of intents, the moving away intent and the moving towards intent. So if we truly want to make progress from a purer place, it has to eventually be, I want to move towards this. More of I want to move towards. And still, there is always a little bit of I want to move away from, but that always has to exist because that's how we've been biologically programmed. Um, there has to be a sense of urgency. Just like I said, life isn't black or white. It's not one or the other. We need both. All different differing opinions, they're all part of the same model of reality and they all are permitted to exist and they're all part of this whole totality. The black and the white, the yes and the no, the positive and the negative. There is a really good high light side of you. There's also a shadow side of you, but those are both needed.
Right.
That's the beauty of life. When you're frustrated, that's also the beauty of life. When you're angry, when you're happy, when you're joyous, those are all parts of you. One can't be desired or put on a pedestal more than the other because they all complete your whole being. So, in understanding that, you know, uh, I've noticed that when I'm driven, most of the time it used to be by pain. Uh, but now it's slowly started to shift towards having fun and enjoying. But there still needs to be an element of, yes, I do have something to prove, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that arises, and that's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. I think that's so huge because, I mean, I talk a lot about the different personality parts and we don't want to have these parts that we don't like or that we judge or think are bad or whatever. And having this attitude of, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes we are going to slip into that part that is proving myself or whatever, and we have to kind of wake up from that and that's okay. And if it's okay, I was just sharing this. The person who produces my podcast, we had this incident and we were going back and forth. And he said, listen, I just got to share with you from business owner to business owner. First, you wanted to do one podcast a week. Then you wanted to do two. Then you wanted to do three. Then you wanted me to start editing this way. Then you wanted me to go back and re-edit the ones that have already been edited. And he like went on and on and on. And I'm sitting there listening to him. And I'm like, oh my God. My hyperachiever part just got so out of control.
Yeah.
Like I was just, you know, like, years ago that would have been like, not and blah, 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 whatever, right? But if you're in the practice of all is okay, you're not judging it. I was able to really see that and be like, oh my God, the universe just dropped this beautiful mirror
Wow.
into my lap.
Yeah.
And I literally like texted him back. I'm like, well, I can't argue with any of that. And, like, wow, it just completely shifted. Like, yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
stop, where are you? Who are you? What are
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah.
But it only comes from that non-judgment, from what you're saying, that ability to say, guess what? It's all okay.
Yeah.
It's all okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's also like having empathy for yourself and like understanding what place you're coming from. Because a lot of the times when I do stuff like that, like I remember I used to do this a lot more in the past, it came from a place of franticness.
Yeah.
I was trying to get somewhere. I'm in a rush to get somewhere. So I'm always like very, very aware of what I'm feeling within my body. Like, what am I in a rush to get to? What is so like, why am I'm like, bursting to try and pop out. Like, come on, like I really want this to happen. Like I feel anxious, I feel nervous, but I feel like, come on, it should be, that feeling of rushness, that's when you got to take a step back and, oh, what am I creating? Because I'm creating from this place. Any action I take from this place will create more and more of this. Center yourself and then see if this still is. Yep.
Yeah, and also like holding that part in place, like all that urgency for
Yeah.
something to happen
Yeah.
holds whatever you want to happen from happening.
Right. Exactly. Because you just established to the universe that, hey, it's it's not happening. You keep saying it energetically, like it's not happening, it's not happening. Oh, it's not happening? Here you
Yeah,
go. More of not
right.
happening.
More
The
of not
mirror
happening.
principle. Yeah.
It brings me back to something you were saying earlier, because I know that this is something that listeners, wonder about a lot. You were sharing earlier about, for example, like if you're feeling anxious, like the person that was feeling anxious about YouTube videos because it would go against what their parents wanted, right? And one of the things that I always like to ask people is, how do you know when we're talking about intuition, right? Like in that example, that person maybe could get to, well, yeah, that motivation to not do this YouTube thing is actually going against what is intuitively right for me, what is my being a greater, version of myself, versus when you're feeling anxious, um and it's telling you something different. Right? Like it could be that you're feeling anxious and it's because you're going against yourself,
Yes.
but it could also be that you're feeling anxious because, "Ooh, I'm about to go do something,
Yeah.
that I should do
Yes.
or
I
not do."
solved this problem a long time ago, and
Okay.
I remember this because I remember, um, feeling this way. It's like, what's the difference between I'm actually this is inner so it's a concept is the concept is called inner discomfort versus, just like outer discomfort, let's say. Um, Outer discomfort is more it's physically uncomfortable. It's just physically uncomfortable because I'm not accustomed to doing this. I've never done this before.
Mhm.
Inner discomfort is it's going against your heart's true desires. And so how you know the difference is with outer discomfort, it will feel like the right thing to do. Like this is highly, highly uncomfortable, but I know it's the right thing to do. And so one way I like to describe this is one time there was gossip happening amongst my friends and people that I met here. And I was accidentally gossiping about this person. And, this person happened to threaten to tell the other person
Oh.
that who was also a friend of mine that, I said this, like, oh, I'm gonna confront this person. And so I was like, shit. Before he hears it from this person, the high integrity thing to do would be for me to say, hey, I had this conversation with this person. So if you hear this from person A, I'm speaking to person B. If you hear this from person A, then I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I hope you don't take it the wrong way. That would have been the right thing to do. And so I'm there contemplating this decision. It feels really, really uncomfortable for me to do this, but
Yeah.
I know this is the right thing to do. And so I picked up the phone. Hey, person person B, this is what happened. Just explain the whole thing. Oh, that's cool. Thank you for letting me know. It's like, yeah, I felt like I should let you know before you heard it, and it strained our relationship. That's an example of something that is the right thing to do, but gives you massive outer discomfort. An example of something that gives you clear inner discomfort is, you're speaking to a prospective client and you're like, shit, I really need to make money. And, I can't really help this person, but they really look up to me. You know what? I'll just make them an offer. And I can tell you the number of times I thought about doing that. I'm like, oh, this is like a bad month, especially when I got started in business. But I was like, it's just not right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know this is going to bite me in the ass one way or another.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna make this person an offer. That's it. Like more money, there'll be tons more money, but I'm buying into the scarcity paradigm, which is making me believe that, oh no, it's gonna run out. But it's not. There's always gonna be more out there. Don't sell your soul for it. Or anything else that, you maybe do a job or something, you're going into your work, you're contemplating the decision whether or not to quit. You know it's the right thing to do, but it just feels so uncomfortable. So it kind of clouds your judgment and makes you think maybe it's not the right thing to do if it's so uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
no. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think I love the example that you gave, because I do think that, entrepreneurs and whatnot and business owners, a lot of times they will take on clients that don't align with their business model, that are going to be a headache, and they know it, but they're like, oh, I don't know, the money's tight. It's not looking like the quarter's not looking good. And all of that just keeps the same energy in place.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that's
Exactly.
a great example.
Yeah.
What do you think? What is the biggest mistake that you see people make when they're trying to manifest? their new lives when they're trying to identity shift?
Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes I see is they make an intention, and every time you make an intention, life will throw you tests.
Yeah.
And these tests are it's a perception thing, right? Like you perceive it as a test because you have an experience. This is completely new. It's outside of your comfort zone. And B, the universe may genuinely be testing your resolve. But what happens during those times is people are too afraid and they back away into their shell. Like, oh no, I can't break free from this. Even though they know this is the demon they need to defeat to get to the next level. They need to go through the dark night of the soul to get to the next level. This is their surrender process. But the biggest mistake they make is they go back to their old thing. They try to quit a job to start a business, but they don't go all in on the business. They don't give it a full chance. Then they return back.
You see that a
Yeah,
lot?
so many
You
times.
do.
Yeah, we see that, or they don't go all in on the business. You know,
One
even
way
though
or another.
they half-ass it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the times they half-ass it. They're like, oh, I'm not gonna do the content to the best of my ability, and like I'm just gonna do it one week and not do it the next week. So there isn't any kind of consistency. But when I started, it was like do or die. There's no other choice. And that's why I like to, the way I like to make decisions is this is the only choice. It works or death. Like, I know it seems kind of harsh and like anti like spiritual woo woo, but that's really genuinely what's worked for me. Is like,
Yeah.
hey, uh there's no other choice. Like I want to make this work and it has to. If it doesn't, I don't know what plan B is, but I know deep down that I'm going to make it work. But it takes a certain kind of person to be able to appetite that, right? Because certain people don't have that capacity for risk. But for me, my threshold for risk was, hey, at least I'm going to finish my degree before I quit,
Yeah.
so that I can go back to any old engineering job because I have the skills to do it.
But I think the other thing, in addition to having that certain personality, is that, I mean, because the unconscious is so very unconscious, and you know, if you go into that with this do or die mentality, but there's this underlying program that's running
Yeah.
that doesn't believe, that feels unworthy, that thinks, oh, you can do it, but I can't. But that's not like totally conscious.
Yeah.
It's this more self defeating type of thing.
Yeah. Well, the thing with that is any kind of belief, the best way it's changed, you can't change it idly. You can't shift that belief idly. You have to show yourself that this belief isn't actually true. So sometimes it might mean let's act from this place and see what happens. So the best way to overcome any kind of limiting belief is to begin with faith.
Mm.
Faith is the antithesis of belief. Belief says, I trust in the known and the seen. Faith says, I have trust in the unknown and the unseen. So faith is what brings new things that weren't in your worldview already about. Belief creates more of what is. Faith creates more of what could be, right?
Wow.
From
Yeah.
from the from the ether. And so, Jesus talked about having the faith of a mustard seed. All you need is faith of a mustard seed, and you'll have the world. Uh, it's kind of like science versus spirituality, right? Science is just explaining existing phenomena. Spirituality is what created this phenomena in the first place,
Right.
right? So it's kind of like both are needed. Both are needed because you need both the mind and the heart congruent. It would be best if you had both the belief and the faith to persevere, to go ahead and do it.
I love the way that you described that. And the piece that it brings me back to is when you talked earlier about looking at ourselves as characters, looking at, what I would call the personality parts as characters, right? And not getting so attached to it. Because I think one of the things that causes to go down the belief route versus the faith route is this I am that. If I fail, I am that.
Yeah.
And so when you couple it with what you shared earlier about, like, well, why don't you try this part on? Why don't you play this character
Yeah.
and see what happens? It just like lightens the load.
Yeah.
And it feels like so much of the time we're walking around with such a heavy load, like we're placing so much
We're
meaning.
carrying the burden on our shoulders. And there's a
Yeah.
great saying in Florence Scovel Shin's book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. She says, cast the burden.
Mm,
Within us, there's this super conscious or the God or the Christ within. Cast the burden. All of your worries and all of your fears, don't worry about it. Send it to God.
yeah.
Cast it to God. And I learned this too, working with my coach. It's like you're carrying the responsibility of your family, of the world, of your clients, of your business, everything on your shoulders. Cast the burden. Stop trying to be perfect because I have this tendency of perfectionism, like, oh, I need to be well put together for this person, for that person. It's such a burden.
It
Such a
is.
burden to try and be perfect. Let someone else try to be perfect. Let them carry the burden.
Yeah.
I'm imperfect. I'm just a kid playing. I'm playing a game. I'm a child playing this wonderful game for a period of, 80, 90, 100 years, however long I'm here on this earth. I'm just enjoying every single day thoroughly of this game that I have a very limited time to play.
Yeah. Plus, that's such a more humble place to launch from, right? When we think we have to be so perfect, it's this, sort of like, well, what, you're so perfect, nobody else. You're the only one who can't make mistakes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know
exactly. It's like, why?
why not?
You don't
Yeah.
judge anyone else for their mistakes. Why do you judge yours so harshly?
Right. Right. So how do you come up with your YouTube content? I mean, you have a very robust YouTube channel. There's so much on there, so much learnings and a huge following. How do you decide what to talk about?
Yeah, so it really depends. So when I started, it was more of like, what am I learning now that I would really like to share? And then as I go through life and experiences, I have these epiphanies that I write down in my notes section. Like, oh, this is a really cool way to describe this concept that makes sense, that I can make sense of it for someone else. Then
Mm.
I'll bring that up in a video or make a video around that. Um, or another way is I'll look at topics that are doing really well. It's very, very popular, and then I'll say what I have to say about it, share my personal viewpoint and how I look at it. Um, instead of how someone else would look at it.
Yeah.
I think those are the main ways in which I come up with content for
And
my
how
channel.
often do you put stuff out?
So I try to make one long form a week and I film like a couple. We're trying this new style where I do 10, 11, 15-minute tops videos. I have a producer who like comes on Riverside and he asks me questions and gets content out of me because I like this collaborative style
Mm.
as opposed to just sitting static looking at a camera. It's quite unnatural when you're just looking at a camera, but if there's a person in front of you, you're speaking to a person, it's a lot more natural.
Yeah, there's a lot more energy going on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what is something that people feel like they're doing right that they're really not doing right?
Hmm. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, it's funny. I get, I started looking ever since I had a kid. I started looking at all of these like safe products to use around the house, safe household cleaning products, safe like this and that. And I get all these studies of like, oh, you're drinking tea, like your tea bag has these microplastics and they can go into your bloodstream and,
Right.
cause all of these issues. And I get all this stuff recommended. But in terms of looking at health and lifestyle, just like we stop drinking tap water, we get like spring water because I think the tap water supply, you don't really know what's going in your body. And like water is 70% of you and
Yeah.
drinking from plastic bottles too. So I've become a little bit of a health nut and I feel healthier for it, but it's like it can also get to your detriment because, if someone were spiritually adept, let's say, they could work out any kind of toxicities or whatever it is within their bodies just by naturally living in a joyous, healthy, happy state. So it helps to not be paranoid about the world around you because anywhere you look, you're going to find any kind of contaminant, radiation. Like there's just so much. But yeah, I mean, that's the closest I can think of is changing your drinking water source. Um,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just mindlessly like, oh, it was always there. Like you don't think about what you're putting into your body.
Yeah, so I don't know why this made me think of it. I have no idea why it made me think of it, but talk to us about meditation and specifically when people are having trouble getting to that spot of stillness.
Yes. The goal of meditation isn't to get to that spot of stillness, it's to just become meditative or contemplative, which actually isn't stillness. It's more so focusing on one thing. It's to train concentration. Um, in the the books where meditation originated, in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, or you wanted to talk about the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali, there is a mention of the three states of meditation. There is dharana, there is dhyana, and there is samadhi. Dharana is concentration and the very first stage of meditation. With intense concentration, the thing that you're focusing on, the subject and the object, they merge and become one. The I and that, me and this, become one. And that's when we become meditative, truly, dharana, the state of meditation.
Yeah.
Sorry, dhyana. Dhyana is the state of meditation where um, separateness kind of dissolves.
Yeah.
And through even deeper dissolution of all, we enter samadhi, true oneness or temporary enlightenment. And out of samadhi, there's probably like maybe eight different sources of types of samadhi. So the very first thing to focus on is just simple concentration. Concentrate on watching your breath. Concentrate on looking at a spot on the wall. So how I started meditating is I would just put a spot on the wall, a dot on the wall. I would just focus on that dot for like 15 to 20 minutes. And you'll notice that your thoughts, when you focus on that one spot, will just organize themselves. They'll
Yeah.
organize themselves and just be very, very still. Stillness will just naturally happen around minute 11 or 12. And every time you get distracted, bring your attention back. Bring your attention back to that spot or your breath, whatever it is.
I'm so curious given that, we've been talking about how this oneness and understanding this oneness is the crux of, finding yourself and moving forward in your life and all of these things. What are your thoughts about the divisiveness in our world?
Hmm. What do you mean in terms of what?
How do you in terms of everything, in terms of health, you even mentioned like, the healthcare versus all natural, in terms
Yeah.
of politics, in terms of Facebook and the craziness and, like what what do you what do you think about with all that divisiveness? Knowing that oneness is the answer.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I've met a lot of spiritual people who did not exhibit spiritual qualities. They just pretended to be spiritual. And I
Yeah.
think my buddy Aaron calls them spiritual narcissists. It's like they think they're better than everyone else.
Yeah.
And so they pull all this crazy shit that you just not expect. Like, try to report stuff on your channel to get copyright strikes on your channel, etc. Like, um, so, and it's not like, what does truly spiritual person do this? Why? Why would they do that? And they're promoting like very, very spiritual ideas. So it's like going back to this divisiveness, you can't arrive. I mean, you can't force oneness. If you force oneness, that's what you become. You just try to mask, narcissism with a label of spirituality or like whatever it is, right? Like I don't want to label someone a narcissist, but
Yeah.
if we're just talking in terms of um, simplicity's sake, you're just trying to put lipstick on a pig when the true realization hasn't happened. True realization we arrive at through spiritual
Mm.
maturity, right? So oneness is something we have to arrive at through realization that, hey, if I harm someone else, it's actually harming me.
Yeah.
If I do wrong to someone else, somehow it's doing wrong to me because you and me were one. And so I would never want to harm you or see something bad happen to you. Unless, of course, we were in a war and like we have agreed to fight against each other, etc. Like it's an agreement, right? Like I wouldn't do it from personal harm. And
Right.
so, it's kind of conflicting because you read the Bhagavad Gita, it's about war and how Krishna is going to war and he doesn't want to kill, but he is advised. Sorry, it wasn't Krishna. I believe Krishna's whoever it is. The advisor is the god is advising the person Arjuna. Sorry, Krishna is advising Arjuna to go and kill. When you're like, why?
Right.
Like, wouldn't God want not to kill? So, it's like there's always gray areas. It's never black or white. But I believe oneness is arrived at through when you mature in levels of consciousness enough to get to that level of, oh, okay, I see now. I see now that when I harm someone else, it actually harms me.
Yeah. More than just the lip service to it, right? Love thy
Yeah.
neighbor. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I just would love to know, what is the one thing that you would like the audience to know? If you could convey one thing to people, what is it that you just want people to know more than anything?
Focus not on having, not on doing, but on who you're becoming every single day. Who are you being in this moment? Which version of you are you channeling? Before you make a decision, who is making this decision? From which place is this decision coming from? Is it coming from that scarce, scared, rushed side of you, or is it coming from this abundant, relaxed, ease, higher self? And if it were coming from this higher self, what would they do? Which decision would they make? And how would they show up?
Oh, that is beautiful and could not fit better with the Intuition Incubator. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you for having me.